Hey everyone. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you think about the characters and their choices. Enjoy the story. It all started at our office holiday party. Honestly, I had been looking forward to it all week, not because of the party itself, but because it was one of those rare moments when Mark and I could unwind together. He works long hours, and I don't exactly have a ton of social events to attend on my own, so the thought of a night out with colleagues felt like a nice change of pace. We arrived, a little late, as usual, and everyone was already mingling, drinks in hand, the music low, and the chatter filled with that warm holiday cheer. Mark and I grabbed a couple of cocktails, and everything seemed pretty normal at first. I had no idea that by the end of the evening, everything would have spiraled completely out of control. There was this one guy, Max, who works in marketing. He's charming in that slightly annoying, too, confident way. We've talked a few times at work, but I never thought much of him. He's married too, just like Mark and I, but Max had this thing about him. He was always kind of making jokes at the expense of others, a little too eager to be the center of attention. At one point during the evening, after a couple of drinks, he got up on a chair and, in his usual loud voice, suggested a game. "How about a little fun, people?" he said, grinning like he had just come up with the best idea ever. "Let's all share the funniest or weirdest thing our spouses do, and see if we can't guess who's whose story." It sounded harmless enough, right? I thought it'd be fun. Everyone else seemed to think the same. So, Mark and I, like the rest of the group, joined in, laughing as people started telling ridiculous stories about their partners. There were jokes about cooking disasters, embarrassing moments in front of the in-laws, all the typical stuff. But then, Max leaned in, looking at me with that weirdly intense stare of his, and casually threw out, "All right, how about we step it up a notch? Let's see if anyone here has had a, well, let's just say, extracurricular experience that we didn't expect." His grin widened as he glanced around the room. The room went a little quieter, and I could feel the tension shift. I laughed awkwardly, thinking, oh no, this could get uncomfortable. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Max wasn't joking. He was serious, and he was aiming this at me. I shot a quick glance at Mark. His face was flushed from the alcohol, but he seemed unbothered. I could tell he was enjoying the attention, too. He always does at these types of events. He gave me a small smirk, like, "Here we go, this is gonna be fun." So, I played along. All right, Max, what do you have in mind?" I said, trying to keep my voice light. Max leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the show. "I just want to know, who here has thought about what it would be like if they were with someone else? Just a little fantasy. No harm in that, right?" Everyone laughed, and for a moment, I thought maybe it was just part of the joke. But then, Max looked right at me again. "What about you, Jen? Ever think about, someone else?" I felt my face turn hot. What was happening here? I could feel everyone's eyes on me. I didn't want to make a scene. I chuckled nervously. No, Max. Not really." I quickly took a sip of my drink, hoping the conversation would change. But Max didn't let it go. "Come on, Jen. I mean, we're all friends here. No need to act all innocent. It's just a question. Ever caught yourself thinking about someone else while, with your husband?" I froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. The question hung there in the air, heavy and awkward. I looked over at Mark again, expecting him to step in, to make some joke to diffuse the situation. But he didn't. He just sat there, watching me intently, clearly curious about how I'd respond. I felt my heart rate quicken. Max's gaze was steady, like he was daring me to say something, to give an answer. The alcohol was making my thoughts cloudier than usual, and I suddenly felt exposed. I couldn't help but wonder if Mark was secretly enjoying the attention I was getting from Max. He'd always been confident, but tonight he seemed different. The air between me and Max felt charged now. Max smiled slyly, leaning in closer. "Come on, Jen, tell us. I'm sure we've all had those thoughts, right?" I could feel my chest tighten. This wasn't a harmless joke anymore. It was a game, and I was caught in the middle of it. The alcohol was making it harder for me to think clearly. I glanced at Mark again. He wasn't stopping this. In the end, I simply laughed it off. I guess we all have our little fantasies, but they're just that, fantasies. But Max wouldn't let it end there. Sure, but have you ever actually acted on them?" He pressed, his voice lower now, more insistent. The room fell silent again. And that's when I made the mistake. I smiled awkwardly and, without really thinking about it, said, "No, but I guess some things are just off limits. At least for me." That was it. The moment was gone. Max laughed, clearly satisfied with the little rise he had gotten from me. I could feel my face burning with embarrassment, but I forced myself to stay calm. I glanced at Mark, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but he just smiled faintly, taking another sip of his drink. The rest of the night passed in a blur. People kept drinking, laughing, and chatting, but the uncomfortable feeling from that exchange with Max stuck with me. I could tell something had shifted. Maybe I was just overthinking it, but when I went to bed that night, the question he asked kept echoing in my head. Had I really answered it the way I should have? Would Mark have been okay if he knew how much it had actually unsettled me? I didn't know the answers then, but I had a sinking feeling that I was about to find out. And so, the story continued from there, though I had no idea how deeply it would change everything. The next few days after the office party were strange. It wasn't that anything had changed between Mark and me on the surface, but there was an undeniable shift in the air. Max's comment, the way he had stared at me, the way I had nervously answered, it all kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I wasn't sure if I was imagining it or if the tension was real. Mark, as usual, was busy with work. He didn't seem to notice anything had changed, or maybe he was just pretending that everything was fine. It wasn't like we'd had a major blow up or anything. But I started to feel this nagging sense of unease, like I was drifting further away from him. That weekend, Max called me. He wanted to grab a drink and catch up after the party. At first, I hesitated. It was awkward. How do you explain why you don't want to hang out with a married colleague who made you feel uncomfortable at the office party? But then I convinced myself that I was being too sensitive. We were adults, after all. We could be civil, right? I agreed to meet him at a bar downtown. It wasn't too far from where I lived, and I figured a quick drink wouldn't hurt. After all, Max had been nothing more than a joke maker at the party. This was just two colleagues getting together for a casual drink, right? I arrived at the bar and saw him sitting at a table in the back, already nursing a beer. He waved me over with that confident, easy smile of his, and I felt my stomach do a little flip. Get a grip, I told myself. This is just a drink. Hey Jen. Max greeted me, his voice a little louder than necessary. Glad you could make it. He gestured to the chair across from him, already making me feel a little out of place. I sat down a little too quickly, trying to hide my nervousness. We ordered drinks and made small talk for a while. About work, the holidays, our favorite TV shows. It wasn't anything special, but I noticed how Max seemed to hang on every word I said, laughing a little too loudly at my jokes, looking at me just a bit too closely. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, after a few more rounds of drinks, something shifted. Max became more casual, more relaxed. He leaned back in his chair, a half smirk on his face. So, Jen? He said, his voice slower now, more deliberate. I've been thinking about that conversation we had at the office party. About fantasies. I felt my chest tighten at the mention of it. The way he said it, like it was some private thing between us, made my stomach churn. What about it? I asked, trying to keep my tone light, though I could feel my heartbeat quicken. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. You know, I can't help but wonder, when you said some things are off limits, what exactly did you mean by that? I froze. I could feel the room closing in around me. Why was he pressing this? Why couldn't he just let it go? Max, I started, but he cut me off. I'm not judging you, Jen. I just think there's a lot more to you than you let on. You're different from the others. You've got that edge to you, the kind of edge that makes a guy think. I felt an odd mixture of discomfort and something else, something I didn't want to name. Was it flattery? Or was it something darker? Something that I didn't want to explore. Max, this is getting a little weird, I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice shook slightly. We're just here for a drink, remember? But Max wasn't backing down. He leaned in a little more, his voice dropping even lower. I think you're more open-minded than you let on. I could show you things that maybe you didn't even know you wanted. Just something new. My stomach churned. My pulse raced. He was crossing a line, and I knew it. But in that moment, I couldn't move. I just stared at him, my mind fighting to make sense of what was happening. Why was this happening? Why was he pushing so hard? Max, stop. I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. You're crossing the line. He didn't stop. Instead, he smiled, a slow, knowing smile, and before I could even process it, his hand was on mine, lightly gripping it. I jerked back, feeling a jolt of panic. My heart hammered in my chest. Jen, he said softly. You can't pretend this isn't there. You've felt it too, haven't you? Don't deny it. I can tell. I pulled my hand away sharply, standing up so quickly that my chair nearly tipped over. Max, I'm not doing this. I'm going home. But before I could leave, he grabbed my wrist, holding me there for a moment longer. Come on, Jen. We both know what's going on here. You don't have to pretend. I looked at him, my heart racing. I was scared, angry, and confused. But there was one thing I knew for sure: I didn't want this. Not now, not ever. With a quick jerk, I pulled my wrist out of his grasp. You need to let go, Max. This is over. I left the bar without another word, my thoughts in a chaotic mess. It was hard to process what had just happened, what I'd almost allowed to happen. What was it about him that made me feel so vulnerable? Why did I feel drawn to him, even when I knew I should run in the other direction? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a blur of guilt, shame, and frustration. I felt like I was on the edge of something, like I was standing on the precipice of a decision I hadn't been ready to make. But I couldn't ignore the feelings that Max had awakened in me. I had to admit it, even if I didn't want to. There was something about him I couldn't shake. And worse, something about me that wanted to explore it. But there was no going back from this. The seed had been planted. And in my mind, I knew it wasn't going to stop there. The following week was one of those weeks where everything felt off. I couldn't look at Mark the same way. I tried, really. I tried to act normal, like everything was fine. But every time I saw him, I felt a pang of guilt deep in my chest. It was like I had betrayed him in some way I couldn't explain. I didn't want to hurt him, and yet, every day felt like a struggle against a truth I wasn't ready to face. I couldn't stop thinking about that night with Max. The way he had leaned in, the way he had spoken to me like I was something he could just have, something that belonged to him. His touch, however fleeting, still sent jolts through my body, even though I knew it wasn't right. What had I done? How could I have let things go that far? But the worst part, it wasn't just Max. It was me. I had wanted it too. There was a part of me, whether I wanted to admit it or not, that had been curious, that had been drawn to him. It wasn't like anything had happened between us. Not physically, at least. But the fact that I had even entertained the idea, that I had let myself get carried away in that moment, was enough to make me sick. Still, I kept telling myself that nothing had actually happened. We hadn't crossed that final line. We hadn't done anything. But then why did I feel like I was already lying? Why did I feel so different? A few days later, everything came to a head. Mark and I were sitting in the living room one evening, the kind of evening where we were just unwinding, neither of us saying much. The TV was on, but we weren't really watching it. I was scrolling through my phone when I noticed something. A notification from my email. I wasn't expecting anything important, but something made me open it. And that's when I saw it. The email from Max. I froze. It was just one sentence, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I know you're avoiding me, but I can't stop thinking about that night. Let me know when you're ready to take the next step. I felt like my heart had stopped beating. My entire body went cold. I hadn't told Mark about Max. I hadn't told him about that night. I hadn't told him about the pressure Max had put on me. I hadn't told him that I had left that bar, shaken, confused, and tempted. I tried to breathe, tried to calm myself, but I couldn't. The words from the email kept flashing in front of my eyes. I could feel my hands tremble as I put the phone down. I didn't know what to do. I should delete the email, I should pretend it never happened, and I should move on. But I couldn't. I knew I had to tell Mark. I knew it was only a matter of time before he found out. I turned to Mark, who was still lounging on the couch beside me, scrolling through his own phone. He seemed so normal, so unaffected. I envied that. How could he go on without suspecting anything? How could he not see that something had changed between us? Mark, I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. He looked over at me, his brow furrowing slightly. What's up? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I need to talk to you about something. He set his phone down, now fully focused on me. His expression was serious, but his eyes were filled with that patient curiosity he always had. He knew when something was bothering me. Of course. What's going on? I swallowed hard. It's about Max. I watched his face shift. He didn't say anything, but I could tell he was listening, waiting for me to continue. Mark, I don't know how to explain this. Something happened, but it wasn't what you think. I began, my words coming out in a rush. He looked confused. What do you mean? What happened? I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to find the right words. I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. After the party? I said, my voice shaking slightly. Max and I, well, we met up for a drink. Just the two of us. And he kept pushing me, asking me about my thoughts on things outside of our marriage. And, Mark, I didn't stop it. I let it go on. I didn't tell him to back off. I didn't walk away when I should have. And I think I wanted it. I'm so sorry. I could see Mark's face change, his expression shifting from confusion to something darker. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and for a moment, he was completely still. You're telling me you met up with him? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. Yes, I didn't want to, but I did. And then, after that, he kept texting me, saying things. I'm so sorry, Mark. I never meant for any of this to happen. He stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. My heart pounded in my chest. I watched him, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just kept walking back and forth. I could see the anger building up in him, the way his fists clenched at his sides. You don't get it, do you? Mark finally said, his voice hoarse. You let him do this to you. You let him manipulate you, Jen. And now I find out from you that you've been meeting up with him behind my back. I felt like I was suffocating. The words were coming faster now, his voice rising in anger. I trusted you. I thought we had something real. And now I find out you've been playing with this guy behind my back. How could you do that to me? Tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't look at him. The shame, the guilt. It was all too much. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't. But I messed up, Mark. I didn't know how to stop myself. I wasn't thinking. I don't know what happened to me. He shook his head, as if he couldn't comprehend what I was saying. He turned away from me, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't know if I can just forgive this, Jen. He muttered. I don't know if I can trust you again after this. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. I had destroyed everything. I love you. I whispered, my voice barely audible. I made a huge mistake, but please don't give up on us. But the silence between us felt like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. The days that followed were a blur. I don't remember much of the conversations after that night. Everything felt foggy, like I was moving through a haze of guilt and fear, unable to see clearly. Mark didn't yell. He didn't throw things or storm off in anger. He was just cold. And that, in many ways, was worse. We didn't talk much in the days after the confrontation. He would go to work, come home, and keep to himself. I did the same, trying to figure out how to fix what I had broken, but knowing deep down that I couldn't just undo the damage I had caused. I was torn between wanting to take it all back and facing the brutal reality of what I had done. I knew I had destroyed the trust between us. Trust was everything in a relationship, and I had shattered it. There was no denying that. But in the back of my mind, I kept wondering, could we fix this? Could we find our way back? That question hung over me like a cloud, and every time I saw Mark, I saw a man who didn't know if he could forgive me. And that hurt more than anything. The love I had for him was still there, but the space between us seemed insurmountable. The nights were the worst. Mark would fall asleep, but I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened, everything I had said. The shame was suffocating, and the remorse kept gnawing at me. I couldn't escape it. I had let Max into our lives in a way that was unforgivable. The connection I felt with him that night, the attention he had given me. It had all felt so exciting in the moment. But now I could see how reckless and selfish I had been. What had I been looking for? Why hadn't I stopped myself? What was I trying to prove? On the 5th day after the confrontation, Mark finally spoke to me again. It was late in the evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table, mindlessly scrolling through my phone when I heard his footsteps behind me. My heart jumped. I hadn't heard him move towards me, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Would he finally be ready to talk about everything? Would he tell me that he needed space, or worse, that he was done? Jen, we need to talk, Mark said, his voice hoarse. I nodded, my throat tight. I know. I've been thinking about it too. I know what I did was wrong, and I don't have any excuse for it. I can't undo what happened, but I can promise you I'll never make that mistake again. Please, Mark, please believe me. He exhaled heavily, like he was carrying a weight that had been there for days. He walked over to the counter, leaning against it, his eyes fixed on the floor. I want to believe you, Jen, he said quietly, his voice strained. I really do. But I don't know how. You let another man into our life. You let him cross a line I never thought would be crossed. And now I have to figure out if I can trust you again. I swallowed, the lump in my throat growing bigger with every word he said. I wanted to scream, to apologize 1,000 times, to make him understand how deeply sorry I was. But I couldn't. There were no magic words, no way to take back what I had done. I know. I whispered. I've ruined everything. I know it. Mark looked at me then, his gaze softer now, but still filled with confusion and hurt. I don't know if this can be fixed, Jen. It's not just the fact that you met him or that you let him push you into something. It's that you didn't come to me. You didn't talk to me? You didn't ask me for help when you were feeling distant or lost or whatever it was? Instead, you let this thing with him grow? That's what I don't get. He stopped for a moment, like he was gathering his thoughts. I don't know how to fix this either, Jen. I don't know if I can trust you again. But I need time. Time to process this. Time to figure out if I can get past it. The words felt like a punch to my gut. I had known, deep down, that this was coming. I had hoped, for a fleeting moment, that he would somehow forgive me on the spot, that things would magically go back to how they were. But that wasn't how this worked. This wasn't a simple mistake I could apologize for and have everything be okay. I nodded, my eyes welling up with tears. I understand. I won't pressure you, Mark. I just want you to know how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what came over me. I don't know why I let it happen. But I swear to you, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Even if it takes a lifetime. He didn't say anything for a long moment. I wanted him to reassure me, to tell me that everything would be okay, but I knew that wasn't realistic. He had been hurt, and I couldn't expect him to just move on because I was sorry. Finally, Mark spoke again, his voice much softer now. I think we both need space. I need to figure out if I can forgive you, and you need to think about what you want. I'm not asking for anything right now, just time. I nodded, my heart breaking all over again. I get it. We stood there in silence for a long while. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, but I knew it wasn't the right time. Not yet. There was too much between us now, too much I had to prove, too much I had to work on. Mark, I love you. Please don't forget that? I said quietly, my voice barely audible. He nodded, but his face remained unreadable. I haven't forgotten. But I need time, Jen. I just need time. As I watched him turn and walk out of the room, a wave of overwhelming sadness washed over me. I had no idea where we were going from here. Would he ever forgive me? Could we ever move past this? But in that moment, I realized something important. This was no longer just about me. It was about us. And if I wanted to make it right, I would have to fight for that. I would have to prove to Mark, and to myself, that I could be the woman he trusted again. But it was going to take time. A lot of time. And even though I couldn't change the past, I was going to do everything I could to make the future worth it.